Have you ever bought something, maybe, a small treat, or perhaps something bigger and felt a little flicker of? Well, something else along with it.
Hmm.
Not just like the satisfaction of having the item, but almost a feeling that you've filled a different kind of need.
Yeah, absolutely. Welcome everyone to the Deep Dive. We're the place where we take a close look at the things that really shape our lives.
That's right.
And today, we're exploring a collection of really powerful personal stories. They reveal these intricate ways our financial lives, intersect with our deepest emotions.
And the pressures of the world around us, too.
Exactly.
So you've carved out this time with us, and we really appreciate that. Our goal here isn't to just dump a load of information on you.
Yeah.
We want to really dig into the core of these experiences, pull out those insights, those aha moments, you could say,
Yeah.
to help us understand why we sometimes make the financial decisions we do. We're talking about those choices that seem, well, driven by a longing for something deeper than just the transaction. Like validation, maybe? Or a sense of security?
Or even feeling loved, yeah.
Yeah.
In a world that feels pretty shaky sometimes.
And through these stories, we're starting to see how societal norms and our own, individual vulnerabilities can have a much stronger pull on our wallets than we might consciously realize.
Hmm.
So we're going to unpack some of these situations, see what they reveal about those sort of hidden drivers behind our spending.
Okay, let's get straight to it. Our first set of stories, they really center around this idea, calling it the price of being chosen.
Okay.
So with Maya. Now, she connected with someone online, right? And he presented this very successful image. And for Maya, who she openly admitted wanting to be admired, this felt like finally being truly seen, like stepping into a life she'd only ever seen on a screen before.
That's powerful. And what's striking about Maya's experience is how quickly that initial feeling, that validation, became tied up with money.
Yeah. You mentioned dinners at fancy places, clothes bought on installment plans. These weren't just dates, were they? They seemed to represent an investment.
An investment in a shared future, yeah. That feeling got stronger when her own money got tight for a bit, and he stepped in, covered the cost.
Ah, okay. So that created a dynamic.
It really did, where contributing financially felt linked to the relationship moving forward.
Right, and that first gesture, him covering things,
Yeah.
it kind of opened a door, didn't it?
Exactly. Because then he started asking for small amounts, always with a good reason, a payment delay, a cash flow thing.
Plausible deniability.
Totally. Maya even remembers him saying she was investing in the version of us that wins.
Wow.
Over just 4 months, she sent him nearly $8,000.
8,000.
Yeah, different platforms. Wiped out her savings, overdraft fees. She even put off paying for therapy copays. It really makes you think, how the promise of moving up socially, even through a partner, can just overshadow common sense with money, especially if you feel like you're stuck where you are.
It really does. Maya's story just brings up that huge question.
Yeah.
What is the cost of feeling chosen when you've always felt insecure? It pushes us to look at those underlying vulnerabilities, right? The ones that can make us more susceptible to these kinds of dynamics where, well, the desire for connection gets leveraged financially.
It certainly does. Okay, then there's Terrence. For him, his credit score, that was a huge point of pride.
Yeah, like a symbol of control.
Exactly. Responsibility. But then his mother got diagnosed with stage 3 ovarian cancer.
Oh, tough.
And that sense of control just vanished, hit by this wave of expenses he never saw coming.
The sheer financial weight of a serious illness. It's something so many people face, unfortunately. Karen's taking unpaid leave to care for her, charging her preferred meds to his Amex because Medicaid didn't fully cover them. It just shows the lengths we go to for family in a crisis. Maxing out a $12,000 credit card in 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
And using buy now, pay later for just everyday stuff. That paints a very clear picture of the pressure.
And the emotional toll was just immense. Even after his mother passed, he was left with the debt, the grief, a pile of unopened bills.
And telling no one.
Telling no one, not even his partner. He felt he had to be the man, carry it all silently. Terrence's story really highlights that conflict, doesn't it? Between how society expects men to be stoic and the reality of, emotional and financial vulnerability when you're caring for someone really sick.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder how often those ingrained ideas stop people from getting help they desperately need.
Precisely. That pressure to project strength,
Right.
to handle it all alone.
It leads to isolation, right?
And serious financial problems. Terrence's story just underlines how unexpected life stuff can completely destabilize even, like, the most carefully managed finances.
And how hard it is to ask for help when you feel you have to keep up that image of being self-sufficient.
Definitely.
Okay, let's turn to Elena. She's a content manager. She decided to use OnlyFans
Right.
as a way to, like, aggressively pay down her student loan debt. Her initial reason, purely practical, a temporary thing, get the balance down.
What's fascinating about Elena's experience, though, is that unexpected emotional layer that sort of crept in.
Yeah.
The money started to mean something different. It began to feel like affirmation,
Yeah.
maybe even affection.
Interesting.
Those direct messages offering help with bills, people sending large sums just for her being online.
Mm.
It created this sense of being valued, maybe even loved in a way she hadn't felt before. You could almost say the money inadvertently tapped into this like deep need she had for validation,
Right.
blurring the lines between, a transaction and an emotional connection.
It really shows that complex tension, doesn't it? The practical goal clashes with this unexpected emotional thing.
Right.
And then the very real social fallout when her family found out about her work.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It makes you think about the different versions of ourselves we sometimes feel we have to show the world. And it leads to that big question. How many versions of yourself have you felt you had to present just to make it through the month?
Elena's journey just shows how easily our ideas of worth and value can get distorted when money and online interaction get tangled up. Sure, there was short-term financial relief, but it came with, significant emotional costs.
Yeah.
And it raises big questions about the actual price of validation online these days.
So what we see across Maya, Terrence, and Elena, it's significant financial losses, sure, but also real emotional pain.
Yeah.
Maya grieving the lost hope of that relationship. Terrence dealing with grief and debt. Elena starting that hard process of seeing her worth isn't tied to clicks or cash. It really brings to mind that quote from Publius Syrus, "Debt is the slavery of the free."
That hits hard.
Yeah.
And it leads us straight to those really deep questions, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Like, how much do we end up owing just for pretending we're okay? Where did we even learn that love or acceptance has a price tag?
Right.
And if you could just wipe the slate clean on those past financial choices driven by emotion, would you?
Heavy questions. But they really encourage us to look underneath,
Yeah.
at the motivations shaping how we handle our money.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. The next theme we noticed was about rooms you can't afford to leave.
Right. We'll start with Janelle. She got a remote tech job, felt this strong pull to create an image of success online.
Pretty common feeling these days.
Very. So she staged this expensive-looking apartment in Los Feliz, temporary decor, pricey furniture on payment plans, all to mask this deep loneliness she felt.
Janelle's story really speaks volumes about that pressure, doesn't it? To project a certain lifestyle, especially on social media.
Totally.
The huge gap between her curated online life and the reality living paycheck to paycheck, spending over half her income on rent. It's revealing.
Yeah.
And then the layoffs happened. Suddenly, the fragility of that whole constructed image just became painfully obvious.
It makes you wonder, when did we start thinking financial trouble could just be curated into content, hidden?
That's a great question. Maxing out credit cards just to look normal while waiting for unemployment, borrowing from friends. It paints a picture of someone just desperately trying to keep up appearances.
And it leads to that other question. How many people do you follow online who might be secretly falling apart behind a filter?
That question about what's hidden behind the polished online facade is so relevant now.
Yeah.
Janelle basically trying to buy her way out of loneliness. It really highlights the dangers of confusing stuff and online likes with real connection and well-being.
Then there's Cameron. He initially did really well with crypto investments.
Ah, the crypto roller coaster.
Exactly. But then he had significant losses. But despite this downturn, he kept up this pretense of being financially stable in his relationship.
Ooh.
Even took his girlfriend to look at properties while secretly having almost nothing left in the bank.
Wow. Cameron's situation just shows how tangled up our money is with our relationships.
Right.
And the lengths we might go to avoid looking vulnerable or admitting we messed up financially. Letting his girlfriend think they were about to buy a place while he was actually looking into bankruptcy, that shows the immense pressure he felt to keep up that successful image in the relationship.
Yeah. Makes you wonder what happens when one person is hiding their financial reality.
The emotional weight of that kind of deception must be huge.
Totally. And it raises some tough questions about trust, doesn't it? Transparency and partnership.
Definitely. Like, what would you do if your partner just never asked about your finances? And how long can love really last when one person is pretending they're okay financially?
Those questions really hit the core of trust and honesty, don't they?
Yeah. Cameron's unwillingness to reveal his problems, it ultimately led to a huge breach of trust. It shows how financial secrets can just eat away at the foundation of even, like, seemingly strong relationships.
Okay, finally in this section, there's Lila. She found herself constantly footing the bill for her partner. He seemed unable, or maybe unwilling, to contribute fairly. Started small parking tickets, groceries.
Slippery slope.
Totally. Escalated to bigger things, like paying off his Amazon card. She just kept giving and giving, maybe hoping to feel needed,
Yeah.
secure in the relationship.
That happened.
But ultimately, it just bred resentment, and the relationship ended.
Lila's experience is such a powerful reminder about balance, right? Reciprocity in any healthy relationship, especially with money.
Absolutely.
Her willingness to give so much without getting much back, it points to that deep desire to feel valued, maybe secure.
Yeah.
But sadly, it ended up with her feeling used. It brings up that really poignant question. How much of yourself would you give away
Yeah.
just to feel needed?
Yeah.
And what part of you is still angry you had to finally stop?
And when we look at Janelle, Cameron, and Lila, their situations were different, sure, but they all faced big life changes.
Right. Finding new ways to make money, going to therapy, dealing with the emotional fallout.
And when you think about average rents in a place like LA or sky-high credit card interest rates,
Yeah, context matters.
it underscores that these aren't just isolated stories. They reflect bigger economic pressures that can make these personal struggles even harder.
Exactly. It brings us back to those core questions. How many situations have we stayed in paying some kind of price just to avoid facing the exit? And when you finally do leave, what emotional baggage do you take with you?
Yeah. Some debts are financial. You see them on a statement.
But others, as these stories show, you pay with parts of yourself you don't get back, losses you don't report to experience.
Losses you just carry silently.
Okay, this leads us into our final area today, the things we buy to feel loved.
Right. Let's start with Brian. He spent a lot of money on early dates with someone he really liked.
Trying to impress.
Totally. Racked up considerable debt. And ultimately, the relationship ended anyway, leaving him with the bills.
Brian's story is such a clear example of trying to buy affection, isn't it? That expensive first date, the gestures afterwards,
Right.
it all came from wanting to be wanted,
Yeah.
to build a connection.
Right.
The disappointment when it didn't last, plus the debt. That's a painful reminder that, well, material things have limits when it comes to the heart.
Makes you wonder, what would someone buy just hoping to feel wanted?
And what would it take to admit it didn't work?
His story has those little details, too, like he's still paying for a streaming service his ex uses.
Oh, wow. See, emotional ties messing with practical financial stuff long after it's over.
Then we have Lena. She describes herself as having this tendency towards pathological caretaking, constantly helping family and friends financially, often hurting her own finances. This habit of giving, finding it hard to say no, it led to huge personal debt and feeling totally depleted.
Lena's story really highlights how deep those caretaking roles can run for some people.
Yeah.
Believing that love means always saying yes, always being the fixer. It can lead to massive financial strain and neglecting your own needs.
That moment when she couldn't afford a small drugstore purchase because she had no money, that really hit home for her.
Yeah, a wake-up call.
It forces us to think about the hidden financial burdens in our relationships.
Yeah, definitely. How much debt are we kind of unknowingly racking up in these dynamics?
And who taught us that being loved means constant self-sacrifice?
Good question. Finally, there's Eli, a musician who kept up a lifestyle way beyond his means.
Even after his online income dropped.
Yeah, this persistent need to project success, maybe to cover up feeling inadequate. It led to risky money behavior and serious legal trouble.
Eli's situation really shows powerfully how our insecurities can drive our financial choices, doesn't it?
Absolutely. That intense need to look like he was worth more than he was,
Yeah.
it reflected this deep fear of feeling worthless.
It leads to those tough questions like, in a crisis, would you rather lose your savings or lose face in front of others?
Right. Who are you really trying to impress just by scraping by?
Yeah. And when we look at Brian, Lena, and Eli reflecting back, there's a common theme, isn't there?
There is. recognizing unhealthy patterns,
Setting boundaries.
and starting that journey towards finding self-worth that isn't tied to what others think or how much money you have.
And again, thinking about the context, average Gen Z credit card debt, rising rents, easy access to buy now, pay later.
It's clear these individual struggles are happening within a larger economic system that can, feed into these tendencies.
And like Publius said again, debt is the slavery of the free.
It really prompts us to reflect, doesn't it?
Yeah. When was the last time you bought something mainly because it made you feel loved or valued?
And what might it take to actually cultivate that feeling from inside yourself without needing a receipt or external validation?
Because ultimately, not every hole we try to fill is financial, is it?
No, sometimes they start with loneliness or insecurity.
And end with a balanced due.
So what these different stories really shine a light on is that incredibly complex, often unspoken link between our money decisions and our basic human needs.
Yeah, for connection, validation, security.
Exactly.
And the key takeaways for you listening in really boil down to this. Financial problems, often signs of deeper emotional stuff going on.
And the pressures of modern life,
Yeah.
those curated realities we see everywhere, they can definitely amplify these tendencies.
And ultimately, true self-worth, real love. You just can't buy those things.
Nope, not on any platform.
So as you take some time to think about what we've talked through, maybe consider those metaphorical rooms you might be trying to stay in.
Or the things you might be buying.
Yeah.
Not just because you need them, but maybe driven by those deeper emotional reasons.
It might just be helpful to sit with these questions, maybe jot down a few thoughts.
Yeah.
And if any of these patterns feel familiar in your own life, please remember just acknowledging these things. Maybe seeking support. That's actually a sign of strength. Self-awareness.
Absolutely. Understanding these connections, these intricate links between our money and our emotions, it really is the first crucial step.
Towards making more mindful, healthier choices.
Exactly, both in our finances and in our relationships.
That feeling of financial stress, it's almost a physical weight, isn't it? That constant underlying hum of worry that seems to vibrate beyond just the numbers on a screen.
That sounds.
And it makes you wonder, have you ever considered if what's really driving your financial choices goes, well, deeper than just the logical side of dollars and cents?
That's exactly the territory we're exploring today, yeah. We've gathered a really powerful set of personal stories, raw and honest accounts that really pull back the curtain on the intricate relationship between our money, our emotions, and, our fundamental sense of who we are.
Absolutely. These aren't just surface level tales about like overspending or getting into debt.
No, not at all.
They're like little keyholes into the often hidden emotional engines that are powering our financial decisions. We've taken a close look at these experiences to extract the crucial insights, those aha moments that might not be immediately obvious.
Right. And the mission for this deep dive is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
To really understand the often surprising ways that our emotional needs and our past experiences can significantly influence how we handle our finances.
Yeah.
Sometimes in ways that aren't really serving our best interests.
Yeah.
We want to dissect these patterns and develop a much clearer picture of what's truly at play.
Okay, let's start with Lana. On the surface, she had this aspiration, this dream of being a child psychologist, a profession centered around care, understanding.
Right.
But her current reality is quite different. It involves creating fake invoices, something she calls pet consulting, and helping to manage her ex-boyfriend's cryptocurrency earnings. A real pivot, right?
Wow, yeah.
And she made this really striking statement that wearing certain clothes makes her feel like a woman who owns her life. What's going on there?
What's really interesting with Lana is this apparent disconnect, between the outward appearance she's cultivating through her spending and the underlying activities she's engaged in. It suggests that the feeling of control and self-possession she gets from these purchases might be a way of compensating for a lack of control or maybe stability in other areas of her life.
Okay.
Her therapist used a very evocative term for it: dissociative financial sabotage, the act of self-harm with a smile and a shopping cart.
Wow.
Essentially, it's suggesting that Lana's spending might be a way to detach from deeper emotional pain, almost harming herself financially without, fully acknowledging the consequences.
That image really sticks with you. And Lana's own explanation, just surviving, it kind of hints at some deeper unmet need she's trying to address through these external things.
Exactly.
Now, let's consider Mia and Caleb. Mia was essentially, well, showering Caleb with gifts and covering his living expenses, things like noise-canceling headphones, a pretty pricey hoodie,
Okay.
and ended up with almost $7,000 in debt and a really high interest rate, like 25.7% APR.
Mm.
Initially, her feeling was that being needed felt like love. What's the dynamic we're seeing here?
Well, this situation with Mia, it really highlights how our fundamental human need for connection and validation can become really tangled up with financial transactions. Her actions, which her therapist described as fawning survival mode or buying someone's proximity, point to a deep desire to secure affection through material generosity.
Fawning survival mode.
Yeah, you could think of fawning as a behavioral response, where someone prioritizes the other person's needs, in this case through money, as a way to feel safe and maybe avoid rejection.
Right.
The underlying hope, however misplaced it might be, is that affection might materialize because of these gifts and financial support.
It's a heartbreaking dynamic, that hope of buying affection. It actually reminds me of Naomi's story.
Okay.
Here's someone who, at least online, projects this image of a very luxurious lifestyle. The Tesla, the expensive groceries, lavish tips.
The Erewhon juices.
Exactly, all fueled by her income from OnlyFans. But behind that seemingly successful facade, there seems to be a real insecurity.
It seems that way.
She maxed out 2 credit cards on a trip to Tulum for a man she met on Threads, only to be ghosted afterwards.
Oh, wow.
Her Instagram post, soft girl era, healing and luxury, feels almost performative after that.
Right.
And her therapist asked this really pointed question. What are you buying when you're buying love? What's your take on that?
Naomi's situation really brings that performative aspect of spending to the forefront, doesn't it? Especially in our digitally connected world.
Yeah, for sure.
The outward display is intended to project an image of worthiness or desirability, but it's often masking a deeper internal void. The therapist's question is so incisive because it forces us to consider the underlying motivation behind these purchases.
Like, what's really going on?
Exactly. Are they feeling a genuine need for connection and self-acceptance, or are they just a substitute for something more authentic and internal?
And it seems that's a consistent thread we're seeing across Lana, Mia, and Naomi, this strong desire to feel worthy, to feel loved, to feel some sense of control. And in those moments, the way they're trying to achieve that feeling is through spending, often leading to significant financial difficulties down the road.
Exactly. It's about an emotional need finding expression through a financial behavior. The act of spending becomes associated with a fleeting sense of self-worth or fulfillment, even though that connection is, well, ultimately unsustainable and can create more problems than it solves.
Let's shift gears a bit and talk about Marcus. He's in a really interesting situation.
Okay.
He's inherited a significant amount of money, $94,000 from his brother, but he hasn't touched it.
Right.
His reasoning is incredibly poignant. If I spend it, then he's really gone.
Wow. That's heavy.
Yeah. Yet at the same time, he's working as a Lyft driver and even spent a considerable sum, $1,200, on an NFT of a crying dog,
An NFT.
saying he wanted to believe something digital could live forever. It's almost like he's clinging to one form of permanence while avoiding another. What's the psychology at play here?
Well, what's really fascinating with Marcus is how grief is being navigated, or maybe more accurately, being avoided through his financial behavior.
Avoided.
He's holding on to the inheritance as this tangible link to his brother, right?
Yeah.
And the act of spending it feels like a final severing of that connection.
Yeah.
Simultaneously, that seemingly irrational purchase of the NFT, this digital representation of something lasting, could be seen as a search for permanence in the face of profound loss.
Interesting, like trying to find something solid.
Kind of. You might think of it in terms of object permanence, our understanding that things continue to exist even when we can't see them. For Marcus, the unspent inheritance might provide a different kind of comfort related to his brother's continued presence in his life, maybe more real than a digital image ever could.
That makes a lot of sense. It's a really powerful contrast in how he's engaging with the idea of loss. Then we have Jaden.
Okay, Jaden.
He lost his job and was immediately confronted by the shame of an overdue Klarna notification for a purchase he can't even recall making.
Oh, that's tough.
He's accumulating credit card debt, like $14,200, across 3 cards with high APRs, and has even had to borrow money from his ex-partner.
Right.
There's this unopened final notice letter that's just sitting there, a physical symbol of his avoidance. What does Jaden's situation tell us?
Jaden's experience really illustrates how financial struggles can trigger these deep feelings of shame and inadequacy, especially when they're linked to a loss of status or identity, like losing a job.
Definitely.
The act of avoiding that final notice letter is such a classic example of how we can try to shield ourselves from painful realities, even though that avoidance ultimately just makes the situation worse.
It just looms there.
Exactly. That seemingly small Klarna notification acts almost as a trigger, suddenly bringing the full weight of his changed circumstances crashing down on him.
And then we have Zane. He's experienced significant losses in crypto trading,
Ah,
coupled with gambling, and he's even taken money from his sister's account. About $12,000 down to $400 in crypto alone.
wow.
He's actively avoiding therapy, which you can imagine could be really beneficial for him right now. Mm-hmm. It feels like these high-risk financial behaviors might be a way for him to perhaps numb some deeper emotional pain he's experiencing.
Zane's story strongly suggests how impulsive and, frankly, risky financial behaviors can become a form of escapism,
Yeah.
or just a way to cope with difficult underlying emotions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The avoidance of therapy is also a pretty significant indicator here. It suggests a potential unwillingness to confront the root causes that might be driving these self-destructive behaviors.
So when we look at Marcus, Jaden, and Zane, we see this recurring theme, right? Using financial decisions or sometimes the lack of decision-making
Right, the enact.
as a way to navigate really challenging emotional landscapes, whether it's dealing with grief, loss of identity, or simply trying to avoid painful feelings.
Precisely. In these situations, financial behavior can become a kind of shield or a distraction, or maybe just a way to exert some sense of control in the face of overwhelming emotions.
Okay, let's delve into how love and finances can become so intertwined, sometimes in really problematic ways.
Oh yeah, this is a big one.
We have Renee. She's in a relationship where her partner seems to primarily reach out when his buy now, pay later balance is maxed out. She ends up sending him money, like $600 for groceries, after he sends her a playlist.
A playlist.
Despite being burdened by significant student loan debt, $127,000, and a very low credit score, like 503, she interprets this dynamic as love.
Oh.
Meanwhile, her therapist has identified it as emotional enmeshment and financial codependency. That's a stark contrast in perspectives.
It really is. And this is a really common and complex dynamic. Renee's deep desire for connection and validation is, unfortunately, being exploited in this relationship.
It sounds like it.
The small gestures from her partner, like sending a playlist, trigger this disproportionate financial response from her. The fundamental difference between her understanding of the situation as love and her therapist's diagnosis, it really highlights how deeply ingrained these patterns can become and how challenging it can be to gain an objective perspective when strong emotions are involved. You might think of codependency here as a relationship pattern, where Renee feels an excessive need to care for her partner, often at her own expense, just to feel valued or needed.
We see a similar pattern with Amina, who is consistently providing financial support to her boyfriend, Malik.
Okay, Amina and Malik.
It's these seemingly small amounts here and there. Zelle for an Uber split, $18. Cash App for emergency groceries, $92. Even $550 after Valentine's for a chain he wanted.
That's up.
It really adds up. Her Discover balance is over $11,700. Meanwhile, he dismisses her concerns and even belittles her feelings when she brings it up.
Ouch. That's not good.
It's as if her financial generosity is just met with emotional invalidation.
Amina's experience really underscores how financial support within a relationship can become really unbalanced and even exploitative. His dismissive comments are a huge red flag. It suggests a lack of respect for her financial well-being and, frankly, an unwillingness to take responsibility for his own finances. The accumulation of those seemingly minor expenses paints a clear picture of a significant financial drain that's being fueled by her desire to support him and maybe just avoid conflict.
And then we have Allie. She is financially supporting her live-in boyfriend through constant small payment requests, Venmo for weed and snacks, $45, the car, $300, studio gear, $1,200.
Constant requests.
Yeah. He even resorts to emotional manipulation by bringing up past trauma when she tries to establish boundaries.
Oh, that's manipulation, definitely.
She even ended up paying for his therapy session that he didn't attend.
He didn't even go.
Nope. It seems like a clear pattern of financial abuse masked as a romantic relationship.
Allie's situation is a particularly stark illustration of how love and the desire to nurture can be, well, weaponized in a relationship.
Yeah, weaponized is a good word.
The constant financial requests, combined with those emotional manipulation tactics, create a dynamic where Allie feels obligated to provide financial support, even at her own significant expense. Paying for his unused therapy session is such a powerful symbol of her investment in a relationship that just isn't healthy or reciprocal.
So across these relationships, Renee, Amina, and Ally, we see how this fundamental human need for love and connection can become so entangled with financial obligations, often leading to really damaging situations where one person is being financially exploited, basically, in the name of love.
Exactly. The boundaries become blurred, and what may begin as genuine generosity can unfortunately evolve into a pattern of dependence and even abuse, all fueled by underlying emotional needs and maybe the fear of losing the connection.
Let's consider Dana's story now. Her reaction to discovering that her boyfriend took out a $7,000 loan in her name and was using her bank accounts is, well, almost unsettlingly calm.
Calm, real.
Yeah. She offers him tea and asks if he needs more. It's such a jarring contrast to the extent of his betrayal, stealing her social security number, accessing her bank login, even taking physical possessions.
Wow. That level of betrayal.
Uh-huh.
And she offers tea.
Right. Her friends perceive her as the strong one, but this response seems less like strength and more like something else entirely.
Dana's seemingly calm reaction in the face of such a significant betrayal could be indicative of maybe a deep-seated pattern of codependency, or perhaps a learned response to past trauma, as her therapist suggested.
Ooh, that makes sense.
The need to appear strong for others can sometimes lead to the suppression of one's own needs and boundaries, making them particularly vulnerable to exploitation.
Yeah.
The stark contrast between her friend's perception of her and the reality of the situation really highlights the often hidden nature of these kinds of struggles.
And then we have Karina. She's meticulously crafting this perfect image online while secretly struggling with a growing mountain of debt from furnishing her apartment.
The social media facade.
Exactly. She's resorting to using new credit to pay off old balances and has taken out a personal loan, all while projecting this image of successful adulting on social media.
Keeping up appearances.
Right. Her therapist identified an internalized scarcity mindset, this deep-seated feeling of never having enough that ironically drives her to overspend in an attempt to create the illusion of abundance. Can you explain that a little more?
Absolutely. An internalized scarcity mindset often stems from early life experiences or maybe societal messaging that creates this deep-seated feeling of lack, even when there's objective abundance.
Okay.
Paradoxically, this feeling of not enough can drive overspending as a way to try and compensate for that internal void and project an image of having enough to the outside world.
So spending more because you feel like you don't have enough.
Exactly. It's like Karina's trying to soothe that internal feeling of scarcity by creating an external appearance of affluence and stability, even though it's actually leading her further into debt.
These stories, Dana's and Karina's, they really underscore the heavy weight of unseen debt and what's been described as emotional poverty.
It's emotional poverty, yeah.
The isolation of carrying this burden in secret, the shame associated with financial struggles, and this underlying feeling that the need to be chosen or accepted outweighs any rational financial decisions. It brings to mind those quotes we came across. Aristotle saying that poverty is the parent of revolution and crime, and Publius Syrus calling debt the slavery of the free. Those feel particularly relevant here.
Yes, those quotes really resonate when we consider the emotional dimensions of debt. The feeling of being trapped, of having your choices limited, of carrying this hidden burden, it truly is a form of enslavement that extends far beyond just the financial implications.
It really is.
The concept of emotional poverty is so important here, highlighting how that deep-seated need for connection and validation can drive us into financially precarious situations.
It's not all without hope, though. We do see glimpses of positive change in some of these stories.
Thankfully, yes.
Mark is taking steps to set up a payment plan and finding a sense of purpose through volunteering.
Right, small steps.
Karina making the difficult decision to sell some of her furniture. Ally finally taking control and canceling that joint credit card. These small actions feel really significant.
They really are. These seemingly small actions represent a turning point, a moment of recognizing the underlying issues and beginning to take concrete steps towards change.
Yeah.
For Marcus, volunteering might be a way of finding connection and meaning outside of his grief and financial situation. For Karina, selling her furniture is a tangible act of confronting her debt.
Taking action.
And for Ally, canceling the joint card is such a crucial step in reclaiming her financial autonomy and setting healthy boundaries.
And that insight from one of the therapists really brings it all together so powerfully. Debt isn't always financial. Sometimes it's emotional.
It's such a simple but incredibly profound statement, isn't it?
It really is.
It reframes how we think about financial difficulties. It encourages us to look beyond the surface level numbers and consider the deeper emotional landscape that so often shapes our financial behaviors.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, these incredibly personal stories, they really illuminate the profound and often surprising ways that our emotions, our past experiences, and the dynamics of our relationships can significantly influence the financial choices we make.
Definitely.
These aren't just isolated incidents. They really highlight some very common human desires and vulnerabilities that can manifest in our financial lives.
Absolutely. It's a powerful reminder that money isn't simply a neutral tool. It's often deeply intertwined with our sense of self-worth, our fundamental need for connection with others, and the ways we cope with the inevitable challenges and emotions of life.
And as you've been listening to this, we really encourage you to take a moment for some, honest self-reflection. Think about your own financial patterns. Are there any recurring behaviors? Any times when your decisions around money felt like they were being driven by something more than just logic or practical necessity?
It's worth asking.
And it's important to remember that you are absolutely not alone in navigating these often complex intersections of money and emotion.
So true. Which brings us to a final, really important question for you to consider. Beyond the numbers on your bank statements and your credit score, what unspoken emotional needs might be currently shaping your financial life?
Yeah.
And perhaps more importantly, what would it truly mean to address those underlying emotional needs directly, rather than trying to fulfill them through your spending or saving habits? It's definitely a question worth exploring. You know that little buzz on your phone late at night, maybe a payment reminder for something you barely remember ordering.
Or that feeling when you swipe your card again and you're not totally sure what the balance even is.
Yeah, exactly. We've probably all had moments like that, these small financial slips. But what if they're actually part of a much bigger picture?
That's really what we're getting into today. We're going way past the usual budgeting tips.
Right.
We've been looking at this collection of really personal stories. Each one is quite a raw look at the hidden stuff, the emotional, psychological things that can lead us into debt.
So we're kind of dissecting those late-night shopping urges, or how a credit card gets maxed out, almost without you noticing. We want to get to the why.
Exactly. Because it's not just numbers, is it? It's tied up with our hopes, our anxieties, sometimes a lot of, emotional baggage we haven't dealt with.
And the goal here isn't judgment, not at all.
No, definitely not. It's about understanding that complex link between feelings, choices, money, and just, our overall well-being.
Yeah. Hoping you listening might have those aha moments, or feel a bit less alone if you've faced similar struggles.
Guilty idea.
Okay, so let's start with one of these stories. Chloe's. It's 3 a.m. She gets a notification for a Shein payment. Stuff she vaguely remembers ordering.
And the key thing, it wasn't that she needed the clothes. It was about chasing this fleeting feeling, like clicking pay later could somehow make her feel worthy of love, I think was the phrase, that immediate hit.
And that desire for the quick fix, the instant gratification, it can signal deeper unmet needs, can't it?
Absolutely. In Chloe's case, her therapist pointed to emotional dysregulation, maybe linked to past abandonment issues.
Ah, okay.
So difficulty managing intense feelings. Shopping became a temporary out, a distraction, maybe even felt like someone wanting her in that moment of purchase. It wasn't really about the item itself.
That resonates. And the Marissa story is similar, but different context. A breakup, right?
Yeah, she called it revenge confidence spending.
Wow.
Over $1,200. And again, not about the stuff, but the rush. That dopamine hit that kind of mimicked the attention she felt she'd lost. Shopping as a coping mechanism for feeling unseen.
And you connect this to the whole buy now, pay later trend.
Well, yeah, think about it. These services make it so much easier to get that immediate emotional lift. They lower the barrier, tap into that present bias, wanting the reward now, worrying about the cost later.
Right. The consequences feel distant.
Exactly. It can easily mask those underlying emotional needs we were just talking about.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit. Kevin's story. He was deep into crypto, hoping for a rebound.
And meanwhile, totally ignoring his taxes because he felt ashamed about being behind.
So instead of facing it, he maxed out credit cards, talking about chasing a high vibration.
Yeah, it's like he was trying to use positive thinking, affirmations as a way to manifest a different reality while the debt just kept piling up.
So debt here is functioning more like avoidance. A fantasy.
That's a really good way to put it. Debt is avoidance. Kevin had this outward image, yoga, meditation, but inside there was this deep fear of failure.
Okay.
The high vibration spending, the crypto optimism, it all became a way to sidestep the anxiety of his actual financial mess and the shame about the taxes. The debt let him maintain this, well, fantasy.
And Adriana's story is so tough. She got caught up with this guy, Malik.
Yeah, she invested everything, emotionally and financially, in this idea that he would somehow save her, but it sounds like he was really just taking advantage.
The debt she ended up with a loan for him, using buy now, pay later, just for groceries, even a title loan.
It all got tangled up with the grief she felt when that fantasy just collapsed. What's really striking with Adriana is how the debt itself became almost a physical representation of that emotional loss.
I see what you mean.
The financial weight mirrored the emotional weight of the broken promises, the realization that the person she thought was her stability was actually making things worse. The debt was like a constant, tangible reminder.
Then there's Jasmine. This highlights how debt creeps into relationships. The pressure for the perfect wedding.
Right. And her fiancé, Evan, just dismissing her budget concerns. That line, "Don't you trust me?"
Oof, yeah. And Jasmine's silence about it all, that became its own kind of debt in the relationship, didn't it?
That's such a crucial point. Relational debt. Financial secrecy. Avoiding those tough conversations to keep the peace or maintain an image. It erodes trust just as much, if not more, than actual money owed. It creates distance.
Corey's story is a really stark example of that eroded trust.
The day trading losses.
Yeah, $14,800 he hid from his wife. Money they had specifically saved for IVF.
Wow.
He tried to justify it, calling it lying with love. But the damage to their trust, their shared dream, it was immense.
It really shows how corrosive financial dishonesty is in a partnership. Even if the intention wasn't malicious, hiding something that's significant cuts right to the core. Financial transparency is just fundamental for intimacy, for shared goals.
And Jared's experience is interesting too, how informal arrangements can go wrong without clear boundaries.
Right. He started contributing to shared costs, but somehow it shifted over time until he was covering almost everything.
Leading to resentment and then actual legal issues when they split up.
It's a real cautionary tale, isn't it? You absolutely need clear agreements and open communication about finances from the start in any shared living situation. Without them, imbalances creep in, exploitation can happen.
Yeah, and it ends badly.
Often does.
Jordan's story adds another layer, inheriting secrets, discovering their dad's hidden life and debts after he passed away.
Imagine dealing with that on top of grief, suddenly facing huge financial burdens you knew nothing about.
It speaks to that silence around money that happens in so many families.
It really does. It shows how financial secrecy can echo down generations, leaving this tangled mess of debt and emotional fallout. The importance of having those sometimes awkward family money talks really hits home there.
Okay, let's talk about the performance aspect. The pressure to look successful, especially online. Erica at Budget Barbie.
Oh yeah, 152,000 followers watching her flawless financial life.
While secretly she's grappling with $18,000 in credit card debt, plus unpaid taxes, a car loan. A totally different reality.
It's a powerful example of that pressure to perform wealth online. The image became a trap, right? Fueling more spending to keep up the facade.
Leading to stress, isolation.
Exactly. That disconnect between the curated online self and the offline reality can be incredibly damaging.
And Sophia's story touches on that too, but maybe from a different angle. Lying on a tax return just to look okay.
Accumulating debt on things like a Dyson Airwrap while struggling with basics. It wasn't about luxury, just projecting normalcy.
It shows the desperation that pressure can create, leading to really risky choices.
Definitely. Wanting to look okay in other people's eyes pushed her into a situation that ultimately created more financial instability, ending with the IRS getting involved.
And Nina's story is quite sobering too. Turning to private online work out of sheer financial need.
Yeah, and finding herself in a situation where boundaries got blurred, making her vulnerable, potentially exploited.
Just trying to pay off debt, but forced to compromise her own peace, her safety even.
It really exposes the tough, sometimes dangerous choices people feel forced into when they're under extreme financial pressure. The hidden costs of desperation.
It's a lot to take in, all these different facets of debt. But what's striking when you look across all these stories is the turning points. They often share common threads.
They really do. Chloe, for instance, got therapy, found practical tools for tracking spending, managing emotions.
Kevin faced the shame, filed those back taxes, committed to honest budgeting.
Adriana found a financial healing group, explored bankruptcy options. Jasmine took control, got credit counseling, started freelancing.
Jordan got legal clarity on the inherited debt, realized the need for open family communication. Marissa froze her credit, sought therapy for the emotional spending drivers.
Megan used lawyers and therapy to tackle financial codependency. Corey joined a support group, handed over finances temporarily to rebuild marital trust.
Nina focused on digital safety, financial literacy, found stabler work. And Sophia started amending her tax return, creating a realistic budget.
So while the specifics differ, you see these core themes again and again. Seeking help is huge.
Yeah, therapy, financial counseling, support groups, legal aid.
And prioritizing honesty with themselves, with others, setting boundaries, developing healthier ways to cope instead of spending or avoiding.
It seems like a shift from needing that external fix, that validation, through buying things.
Exactly. Towards building internal self-worth, finding a more genuine sense of financial stability and peace.
But it's also crucial to remember, like you said, that healing isn't instant. The effects linger.
Oh, definitely. Chloe still sleeps with the lights on sometimes. Kevin's wardrobe is minimal now. Adriana feels proud of her savings, but still battles insecurity.
It shows that financial recovery is a process, right? The emotional side takes time.
Absolutely. It's not just about getting the numbers right. It's about processing the emotional stuff, the shame, the anxiety, the hypervigilance that can stick around. True healing addresses both the financial and the deeper personal scars.
So if there's one main takeaway from weaving all these stories together, it's that debt is rarely just about money.
Not at all. It's deeply tangled up with our feelings, our relationships, even our sense of self.
Which leads us to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to maybe mull over.
Yeah, think about those debts we carry that don't show up on a statement. You know, the weight of shame, the burden of secrets, the emotional toll of past choices.
Recognizing those invisible burdens, that might actually be the most important first step towards real financial well-being.
What part of these stories resonated most with you? Are there any hidden debts you might be carrying yourself?
It takes courage, real courage, to be honest with ourselves about money and why we make the choices we do. But that understanding, that's powerful. It's the start of the journey to a healthier financial future.
Okay, let's talk about debt. But maybe not the kind you immediately think of, not just the numbers, right? What about the weight you feel after a tough money talk? Or that little pang when you catch your reflection, the debts you can't quite see. Welcome to the deep dive. We're going to put aside the APRs just for a bit. Today is about exploring those hidden wounds, the ones that come from financial struggles, and we're doing it by looking at a collection of real stories, real experiences that are all kind of connected. These aren't just random anecdotes. They show these broader patterns of how money gets tangled up with, well, our emotions, our relationships. So our mission here, it's really to understand those invisible layers of financial difficulty, to get some insight, foster some understanding. Definitely no judgment.
Absolutely. It's fascinating when you put these personal accounts side by side. You really start to see the complex emotional world that sits just beneath the surface of our financial lives. We often treat money like it's just about transactions, numbers on a page. But these stories, they really drive home how deeply connected it is to our sense of self, who we are, our relationships, even our identity.
Yeah, deeply connected. Okay, let's dive into one area where that connection is, well, it can be really intense. Love and debt. How they get so tangled up. Lauren's story, for instance. It's powerful. She financed a wedding ring, $5,000, a real symbol of a future she believed in. And then, just 3 months later, that future, gone. The engagement was off. Suddenly, she's stuck making these payments like $200 a month for something that just reminds her of what fell apart.
And her ways of coping.
Mm-hmm.
That expensive candle she bought on impulse, trying OnlyFans, grinding away doing Instapart.
Right. It feels like she was reaching for some kind of emotional relief, maybe through spending or just trying something, but it was actually making the financial side worse. It makes you ask that question, would you pay monthly for proof someone once wanted you? It's heavy stuff.
It really is. And Lauren's situation, it touches on something we see a lot in behavioral economics. There's a pretty clear link between feeling bad, negative emotions and more impulsive spending. So that candle, those new ventures, they might have been attempts, maybe subconscious ones, to feel a bit more in control or boost her self-worth after the heartbreak.
That need for connection, it seems to drive so many financial choices here. Like Alexa's story. Over just 1 year, she spent nearly $20,000 trying to, secure a relationship with someone who just wasn't committing.
Wow, $20,000.
Yeah. And it was everything from, daily stuff like matcha lattes and Ubers to bigger things, car insurance, even rent contributions, all going onto a credit card, probably a Chase Sapphire, racking up interest at, who knows, maybe 20% APR. That number we see but maybe don't always feel until it's too late. And the emotional side, being left on scene all the time, having a smell like cologne she bought him, constantly remind her. It just begs that question again. What would you buy just to feel wanted?
Alexa's experience, it really highlights how much social validation can influence our spending. That desire to belong, to feel accepted. It's a powerful motivator. Sometimes, it can push aside purely rational financial thinking. And this often gets amplified in romantic contexts, doesn't it? Where affection and spending can get easily mixed up.
So poignant. Then there's Diana. Her story revolves around IVF, which is already so emotionally and physically demanding. And financially, too. $14,000 in debt on a Wells Fargo card, likely with interest piling up, all pursued with a partner, who then left after the last cycle failed. So she's left with the grief, the what-ifs, and this huge debt. Her therapist mentioned things like survival guilt and anticipatory grief, just devastating.
It speaks volumes about the emotional weight.
Right. And it makes you think, what financial sacrifice would you make to hold on to hope, especially hope for something so profound?
Diana's situation also really brings home the financial vulnerability that can happen when you're sharing big hopes, big dreams within a relationship. When things don't work out, the financial hit can land much harder on one person, especially with something as costly as fertility treatments. It's a tough reminder, isn't it? About needing open financial talks, even when the topic feels incredibly personal or hopeful.
Definitely. And this theme, this vulnerability, it just keeps coming up. We heard from a listener who sent a lot of money, like via Zelle, to someone called David, based on these emergencies that, well, they turned out to be fake. He just ghosted her. Now she's got maxed out credit cards, Citi, Amex, probably high APRs, again, struggling to afford her apartment, scrolling Venmo, seeing his old requests. It's heartbreaking. Again, you have to ask, what would you buy or send just to feel wanted?
It's a recurring question, and it points to something quite deep.
And we see it mirrored, almost, in the story about Lucas and another listener. Constant Venmo requests, groceries, car insurance, you know the drill. She was trying to keep things afloat, buying shine dresses for dates, covering coffee while dealing with unaffordable rent in Chicago, piling up Discover card debt, going into overdraft. It sounds a lot like what some therapists call financial codependency.
Financial codependency, yeah. In simple terms, it's where you're supporting someone else financially, but it's actually harming your own finances. And often it's driven by this emotional need, maybe needing to feel needed or trying to avoid conflict or abandonment. Those financial boundaries get blurred, and it becomes this way to manage the relationship, but it's usually not sustainable in the long run.
It's like you're paying for affection almost. And then there's the listener who sent money to Jasmine using Cash App. Just one emergency after another, then boom, blocked. Gone. Leaving behind overdraft fees, a closed bank account. Just wreckage. Her therapist apparently called it love bombing reversed and a trauma bond. Love bombing is usually that intense affection up front, right?
The overwhelming attention and affection at the start.
So this reversed idea, it's like the vulnerability comes first, triggering the support. It makes you consider, would you rather lose your savings or lose the person who you thought saved you?
That concept, love bombing reversed, it's quite insightful. It suggests a kind of manipulation where maybe displays of neediness or crisis are used to get financial help. It creates a sense of obligation, maybe dependency, in the giver. Then the sudden withdrawal, the ghosting, leaves them not just broke, but feeling deeply betrayed. And that betrayal, combined with the earlier connection, can reinforce what's called a trauma bond, that really strong, often unhealthy, attachment that can form in confusing or abusive dynamics.
Okay, so shifting gears slightly, but still related to these hidden wounds, let's talk about secrecy. The weight of secret finances and how that affects identity. The shame around money troubles, especially hiding them from a partner, can be incredibly corrosive. Take Lena. She was making decent money, $1,200 a month, from OnlyFans, but she was terrified her boyfriend would judge her, so she kept it hidden. Living in Detroit, juggling other jobs to pay rent. That secret income was maybe a relief valve financially, but it created this huge sense of isolation and anxiety. Her therapist used the term codependent avoidance. Interesting. How much debt or income are you hiding in your relationship?
Codependent avoidance.
Yeah.
In this context, it probably means her secrecy, while maybe feeling like self-protection, was actually part of a pattern. an unhealthy pattern in the relationship where avoiding the difficult conversation, avoiding potential conflict or judgment actually prevents real intimacy and, prevents them from tackling things together.
And Lena wasn't alone in this. Nina had a very similar situation. Hiding OnlyFans income, boyfriend, part-time jobs, rent in Portland this time. But there was an extra layer. She took out a cash advance, which hurt her credit score. A direct, tangible consequence of the secrecy. And when her boyfriend found out, he accused her of mistrust, which, highlights the damage secrecy does. Her therapist mentioned avoidant attachment compounded by financial shame.
Avoidant attachment, that often involves a general discomfort with closeness, with relying on others. So you combine that with shame about your financial situation, and it's like a perfect storm for secrecy. You might just avoid talking about money altogether because you're scared of being judged, which then just reinforces that avoidant pattern and becomes a cycle.
And we see it again with Zara. Hiding OnlyFans income, 3 jobs, rent in Miami, credit card debt piling up, overdrafts. The whole stressful package. Her therapist called it codependent secrecy. It's this recurring theme, isn't it? The way financial secrets and relationship dynamics get tangled. It really makes you wonder how many unspoken money issues are creating distance between people who actually care about each other.
Absolutely. These stories really underscore how crucial financial transparency is for building trust. It can be hard, no doubt. But secrets, even if you think you're protecting someone or yourself, they often end up eroding the very foundation of the connection.
And it's not always about hiding income, right? Maya's story is a bit different, but still about hitting struggles. She started using buy now, pay later, Klarna, in her case. Those little payments seem so easy at first, don't they?
Deceptively easy.
Exactly, but they added up fast. Suddenly she had all these past due payments. Her credit score took a hit, which, affects your ability to borrow later. She had low income, high rent in Brooklyn, and she was buying stuff from Shine kind of as a coping mechanism, a visible habit masking this invisible, growing debt. So the question shifts slightly. How much debt are you hiding, maybe even just from yourself in your reflection?
Maya's experience really shows the allure of that instant gratification these services offer. It's so easy to click buy. It smooths over the future obligation, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But when those small debts pile up, it can become overwhelming very quickly. And that can lead to this cycle of just avoiding it, feeling stressed, maybe spending more to cope, and getting deeper into trouble. She did find solutions, though. Credit counseling, a prepaid card.
Okay, let's pivot to another theme that emerged. The lure of easy money. That promise of a quick fix and the risks that come with it. Darren's story with crypto flipping is a classic example, maybe. Making big amounts sometimes, he said, but having literally nothing to show for it. Constantly overdrafting his bank account, living on gig work and energy shots, and terrified of opening mail from the IRS because of back taxes. That's a specific kind of dread.
Oh, definitely. Tax issues add a whole other layer of stress.
He was just trapped in this state of constant financial anxiety, all fueled by chasing quick returns. It makes you ask, what do you owe that you're too scared to even open the envelope? He eventually got tax help, a payment plan, started using YNAB, which is a budgeting app.
Darren's situation really points to the dangers of jumping into complex financial things like crypto trading without really understanding the risks, the mechanics, the tax implications. It's easy to get focused on the potential upside, the big wins, and kind of ignore the basics of responsible money management. That can lead to impulsive choices with really negative outcomes.
And the crypto theme, well, it continues, but with even more devastating results for Ethan. He borrowed money, a lot of it, sounds like a margin loan from BlockFi maybe, to invest heavily in an NFT project. And it crashed, wiped out his savings, contributed to his marriage ending. He's left alone in an expensive apartment with huge credit card debts, high APRs presumably. His therapist called it repeated financial self-sabotage. That phrase really sticks with you.
It does. It suggests a pattern.
Yeah. And it poses that awful question, would you rather lose your savings or lose the person, the support system, who might have saved you from the risk in the first place?
Ethan's story, it really highlights that critical difference between, say, thoughtful investing and just pure speculation. When you're driven by FOMO, fear of missing out, or the promise of getting rich quick, it's easy to take on risks that are just way beyond what you can handle or even fully understand. And the personal fallout can be immense. That therapist term, self-sabotage, hints that maybe deeper psychological things are at play in the financial decisions.
And we saw similar heartbreaking patterns elsewhere. Jared, big losses from crypto margin trading, again BlockFi mentioned, leading to debt. His girlfriend leaving, moving back home. His therapist saw it as compulsive risk-taking fueled by financial trauma. Then Miles lost a ton in crypto, margin calls forcing him to sell at a loss. Marriage ended, high credit card debt. His therapist called it financial trauma repetition.
Repeating past damaging patterns.
Seems like it. And Jason invested borrowed funds, another BlockFi loan mentioned, in a crypto startup. It collapsed. Marriage over, couldn't afford rent, high credit card debt. His therapist's take, trauma-driven impulsivity. It really seems like chasing that fast buck for some people might be a symptom of something deeper, maybe unresolved financial anxieties or past hurts.
I think these stories, taken together, strongly suggest that. For some individuals, that pull towards high-risk, high-reward ventures isn't just about the money. It might be a way of trying to cope with underlying financial stress, or maybe even replaying past financial traumas in an attempt to somehow master them. The allure of a quick fix is incredibly powerful when you feel financially pressured or stuck. But as these experiences show so painfully, it often just makes everything much, much worse.
Okay, one last major theme to explore. The connection between self-worth and financial pressure. How secure we feel financially impacting how we feel about ourselves. Tanya's story really hit me. Lying about losing her job, trying so hard to keep up appearances, networking drinks she couldn't afford, financing a blazer with Zip, like a short-term loan service, all while her credit score was dropping and she felt like a total fraud inside. That blazer. It just says so much about the pressure to look successful. How much of your identity is built on how you look like you're doing?
Tanya's experience is so relatable, unfortunately. It really shows the intense pressure, both from society and maybe internal, around financial status and career identity. That fear of judgment, the desire to maintain a certain image, it can absolutely drive people towards financial choices that aren't sustainable. And it creates this huge emotional burden, right? The bigger the gap between how things look and how they really are, the heavier that weight becomes. She did find her way out, income-based repayment for loans, therapy, found a remote job, and importantly, told her mom the truth.
And Marcus, living with his ex-wife because he couldn't afford rent in Atlanta on his stagnant salary. Feeling like a ghost in his own life, he said. Crushed by student loans, maxed out credit cards, losses from crypto adding to it. It just shows how financial insecurity can completely erode your sense of self, your agency. And again, that tough question comes up. Would you rather lose your savings or lose the person who saved you? Even if saving means living in that kind of awkward, difficult situation. He eventually refinanced loans, started freelancing, moved in with a friend.
Marcus's situation really underscores how money problems can seep into the most personal parts of our lives, our homes, our past relationships. It can create these living arrangements that are just deeply uncomfortable, emotionally taxing. And that feeling of being trapped, of losing control over basic life choices, that can do a real number on your self-esteem, your mental health.
And finally, Elena. Co-signing a loan for a boyfriend who then just vanished, ghosted her, leaving her with the debt the collection calls hammering her. Her ways of coping, drinking, scrolling TikTok, buying crystals, they just speak to the sheer distress of feeling betrayed and trapped financially. Her credit score tanked, panic attacks started. Her description of feeling like a child in a world that requires an adult is just, wow, so powerful.
It really captures that sense of overwhelm and vulnerability.
Yeah. And it brings us right back around to that core human need, doesn't it? How much love or the promise of it would you pay for if it promised to make you feel needed? She took action, though. Police report, fraud flag, found a financial planning nonprofit.
Elena's experience is such a stark warning, isn't it? About the risks when financial trust is broken in a relationship. The consequences aren't just the immediate debt. They can ripple outwards, affecting credit for years, influencing future financial decisions, maybe even making it harder to trust in future relationships.
So, as we've walked through all these stories, these interconnected lives, that idea we started with really lands, doesn't it? The deepest financial wounds, they're often the invisible ones. They live in the anxiety you don't talk about, the bills you don't open, the messages that go unanswered. They might not show up on a spreadsheet, but you feel them.
Their impact is undeniable.
Right, like that old quote from Publius Syrus, "Debt is the slavery of the free." These stories show how money struggles can quietly chip away at our relationships, our hope, our sense of freedom, often leaving people feeling incredibly alone.
And I think what's really crucial to take away from all this is that financial well-being, it's almost never just about the money. It's so deeply tangled up with our emotions, our connections with others, our sense of who we are. So really addressing financial problems often means we also have to acknowledge and maybe start to heal some of those underlying emotional wounds, those relational dynamics.
So as you've listened to this deep dive, hearing these very real stories, maybe take a moment to think about your own relationship with money. Are there hidden burdens there? Unspoken anxieties, maybe? What's the real cost, not just in dollars, but emotionally, when we try to fill unmet needs through spending or through taking huge financial risks? And maybe what kind of courage does it take to really face your financial truths, the ones you can see, and maybe especially the ones you can't? Recognizing those hidden dimensions, well, that feels like a really important first step towards a healthier, more secure financial path.